Yay. Probably nice.
I've covered her.
Oh,
That's just it.
okay. It's
Right.
just there. All right. Lovely.
An actual unveil. It's gonna
It's on the 6th, Friday.
Friday.
Hey, it's 6 o'clock.
All right,
6
we're ready.
o'clock. Okay, 6 o'clock. We'll call the Middleton Finance and Personnel Committee to order. Bill, please handle a roll call.
Yes, Haniro,
Here.
Lorman,
Here.
Crow,
Here.
all present.
Okay, I have no comments regarding minutes, fellow members.
Nope.
No,
Okay,
look good.
we'll accept the minutes as submitted. Audit of the bills.
I do have one addition tonight that is for Strand Associates. The dollar amount is $3,725.94, and that is for engineering on the Cayuga Connector bike path.
How many cents?
94.
90. Strand. Okay,
And I'll move approval of the audit of the bills.
Just Crow, I'll second.
alrighty, all those in favor of audit of the bills, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Okay. Resolutions. Resolution 2025-29, authorizing the assurance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $4 million of our general obligation promissory notes. Fiscal impact, of course, is $4 million of capital borrowing.
Yep, and we do have Brad Vigood from Baird on the Zoom, and he's available to give a brief discussion regarding this item.
Sure. Would we like to have a
Sure.
overview? Okay.
And before we get to the discussion, I guess I'll move to recommend the council approve resolution 2025-29.
I'll second that. And do we have,
All right. Can you
what's
hear me okay?
happened last time? Brad, we can hardly hear you.
Okay, I'll speak up as much as I can. Is it coming through a little bit?
Barely, absolutely barely.
It might be something to do with the fan.
No, it was last time too.
Well, right, but now it's even harder because we have a fan going.
Well, I'll just provide a summary of the financing and answer any questions that might come up. But this is, as we introduced this item last month for just to sort of lay the groundwork, you're considering a resolution tonight that establishes a narrow set of parameters. And once those parameters are achieved, the debt can be awarded outside of a scheduled council meeting. So on the first page of the presentation, I'm just providing a summary of the municipal bond market interest rates. And I'm providing this mainly as a comparison for where rates were 1 year ago, which is that bottom gray dashed line, to where interest rates are currently, which is the solid blue line. What you're seeing is the shape of the yield curve has changed from an inverted yield curve with very flat yields all the way through 10 years to more of a normal yield curve where we have this upward slope from year 0 through year 10 and beyond. By way of summary, on the following page, the resolution provides for sale of not to exceed $4 million. The not to exceed interest rate is 4.75%. However, based on current market, I expect the interest rate to be closer to 3.8% rather than 4.75. The city is again amortizing this debt over an 8-year period. So a rapid repayment, and that's really consistent with past practice of the city to try to repay your capital debt within a shorter time frame than certainly than what's permitted by statutes, but even really shorter than the issuance of a lot of your peers. And that, of course, helps keeps the total interest payments lower than they would be if the debt were extended beyond 8 years. The purpose of the financing is to fund your 2025 capital program. And the maturities, part of the parameters is each individual principal payment may increase or decrease by $400,000. And that's really an effort to meet the debt service targets of the city, so that at the time that this issue is being finalized in the market, we have the flexibility to shift the principal payments around as needed. On the following page, you'll see a summary of the timetable. With the committee's authorization tonight, this would go in front of the council tonight for further consideration. Baird and city staff are making preparations for the issuance. So we're preparing the official statement, which is a disclosure document. We're preparing for getting a bond rating from Moody's, and we expect the AA1 rating to be affirmed. And then Baird would market this obligation, and we intend to lock in to really finalize everything on June 24th. But again, with this resolution, we have some flexibility to shift that date a little bit if needed. And then the closing would take place July 15th. And then finally, on the following page, towards the left-hand side under the boxed-in area is the projected repayment for this issue. You can see principal, interest, a little bit of a bid premium to offset the 2026 payments. Of course, the left-hand side, we include your levy-supported debt payments that you've already committed to. Towards the right-hand side of the page, we have a couple of placeholders. One is offsets from impact fees of $215,000 for 3 years, and then $150,000 in 28 and 29. And then I've got a placeholder for future debt payments on the city's annual CIP program. That's here just for planning purposes. You're not taking any formal action on that tonight, but what we're really trying to map out is the combined debt service that's expected to be supported by tax levy. And that's towards the right hand under combined debt service. That's the combination of the issue you're considering tonight, and the hypothetical future financings. And what you'll see is there's upward steps in debt payments until 2027, and then debt starts to drop off beyond 2027. So that could allow for layering in if there's other capital projects, or it could allow for a reduction in the debt service mill rate. That's on the tax bills of your taxpayers. So I'll pause there. I can go into more detail or answer any questions if you'd like.
Anybody have questions?
I just
Yes.
have one question. Thank you for that, Brad, and thank you for speaking up as much as you can. Looking at this page, I see the note B talks about future issues of $4 million at 3% each year amortized over 8 years. And I know this is provided just for information purposes, but I wonder, for you and Bill, I wonder in the future, can that number be adjusted so that we're considering what we actually think we might be borrowing, which gradually will increase just for the CIP, but then also once council makes a decision on the community campus plan, will that be added to this table to give us a sense of, our future levy supported debt service?
Yeah, Bill,
Yeah.
do you want me to take that, or?
I can start, and then you can feel free to add anything on, Brad. So certainly we can add, and we've started discussing during the capital planning process of we've been at a 4 million target for some time, and with inflation, potentially looking at stepping that up to inflationary amounts. I think that could be added. I think what's here is kind of for simplicity for doing a projection out, but we can refine that and add that in the future. And then as decisions are made about the community campus, I think that could be shown as well. That was not built in here in part because there's such a wide range in estimates at this point. So in presenting this to Moody's and for other things, we're going to talk about community campus, but at least I didn't feel it was appropriate to pick a number to put in here at this stage in the process.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
anybody else? No, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. If there are no other discussion, I think we'd be ready for action.
Alrighty, well, then I'll restate the resolution in front of us. Resolution 2025-29 authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale not to exceed 4 million. General obligation promissory notes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
And now we are into presentation.
Yes, we do have John Frater, a member of our audit team, who's here to present the highlights, discuss the audit and answer any questions. And then the potential action on this item would just be to recommend acceptance of the financial statements to the Common Council.
Okay. So we have a presentation first and then,
I think that's fine.
all right.
On? Do I need to turn this on or is it? Thanks, Brian. Yep. It's all good. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Bill. And thank you to the committee for having me here this evening. I said to Bill on the way, and this is always the best commute I have all year. And I wish they were all this short. So no, it's nice to be here. I'm going to spend most of my time, 5 to 10 minutes on the materials that I think, yep, Bill's pulled up. Thank you. These financial highlights, they should be very similar to what we've walked through in the past. As I do that, please let me know if you have any questions. That's one of the main reasons I'm here. Before I touch on that, though, just a couple of quick administrative items. We did just issue finals yesterday. Coincidentally, I think that was the same time as last year, the day before the meeting. The PDF has been distributed and the paper copy should be here very soon. That's nice because it gives the city, Bill, a whole month almost to submit the GFOA before the deadline of June 30th. So hopefully the city will be obtaining its, I think, seventh award, 7 consecutive award, which is just wonderful. It's a high bar to achieve. A lot of things that are looked at. And there's not a whole lot of governments throughout the country and Canada that do that, but Middleton's done a very nice job with the report. So that's where we're at. As far as how the audit went, it went very well. It always goes really well here for a number of reasons. One, because of the timing, like I just mentioned, we're not running down to the wire, trying to get things done at the last minute. That's hard on everybody. We only had 1 material entry for the audit this year, which is really outstanding. I always say, especially for an entity of this size, 10 or fewer is a good benchmark. Some years we don't have any, and this year we just had 1, and that means it's not only good for the audit, but it means your records as you look at them on a monthly basis or during budget time or whatever it may be, or departments relying on those, you know that they're in good shape. And that's really critical throughout the year. So that's another big contributor. We also issued what we call an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. It means they're prepared according to generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP. All the accounting rules that have to be adhered to, there's 101 of them now that are in force, and a few more down the road. Not all of them apply to the city, but many of them do. So keeping that clean opinion is important for a lot of reasons, for your bond rating, like you just talked about, and all kinds of things that can be impacted by that. But I think more than anything, just overall, the city's ability and willingness to be prepared for our audit. We come in with a pretty decent sized team, as do the utility auditors. We ask for a lot of things. And some of those can be rolled over from year to year, but if you were to look at those spreadsheets, they're pretty extensive. And Bill and Diego and others here at the city do a great job of preparing for this for us. So we really appreciate that, and it makes the audit go like it's supposed to go. we can focus on the right things. So with that, I'm going to walk through these highlights and talk about some of the numbers. Page 1 is taking a look at the fund balance, and fund balance categories are dictated by GASB 54 that came out a number of years ago, about 10 years ago or so. And if you think of, as you know, the general fund is your primary operating fund for the city, and fund balance can end up in these different categories or like buckets, right? And I'm going to start at the bottom, and that's non-spendable. And the current year, 2024 amounts are in this kind of sky blue color. Prior years are the black amounts. So very small amount in non-spendable. That's what you want, because non-spendable, basically, they're by definition of GAAP, it ties up your fund balance. So they're not liquid. You can't use them for budgeting purposes and things like that. So the less you have in there, the better. And the city has done a nice job of maintaining a small amount. Those are made up of prepaids and inventories. You obviously can't spend those. You can't spend inventory, you consume or use it. And some non-current receivables, those that are coming in with longer than a year's time. Nothing in restricted, nothing in committed. The assigned is probably what you're more interested in. That went up a little bit this year from 5.6 to $6 million. Those are assigned by, I believe, this committee. And they're set aside for things such as carryovers. There's been $225,000 set aside for revaluation. That's been there for a couple of years. $693,000 for 2025's budgeted transfers to other funds. 2.9 million that's been funded for compensated absences. That went up a few $100,000 from the previous year. The city does a nice job of planning for that, to plan ahead, so that's not such a shock to the general fund. About 2 million in fire and EMS expenses. All the details of that are laid out on page 42 of the financial statements, if you're interested in a little bit more than I just shared with you. Everything else rolls up into this unassigned. And so the unassigned is available for all kinds of things. We'll see the next page on that, how that plays into your policy. But that went up $378,000 from last year. If you're interested, from 22 to 23, that also went up by $600,000. So it's been going the right direction for the last couple of years. Overall, that top bar, your fund balance went up $857,000. And you can see that laid out about 2/3 of the way down in the summarized income statement. Your revenues came in over budget by just over $1 million. That was driven by permits coming in about $400,000 overall when you look at all the categories of permits, but primarily by your investment income, which was $855,000 over. You did with a lot of places that we ought to do your budget conservatively for that, wisely so. And the market was very strong in 2024. So you saw the benefits of that. Expenditures came in under budget by $727,000. That was driven by kind of back and forth. Again, if you look in the back of the financials on pages 55 to 58, but the ones that stood out to me were police and EMS being under budget. So on page 2, like I said, you can see how that kind of falls into your policy, which is, as stated on the very top here, your unassigned, you try to maintain between 16 and 33%, or in other words, 2 to 4 months of your subsequent year's budgeted expenditures, but you also exclude any debt service, any one-time transfers to other funds from that calculation. So at the end of the year, 2024, you can see you came in at 30.9%. And that red line there is how it's been mapped out for the last 5 years. So you're within your policy, you're towards the upper amount. That shows really good fiscal management and that you're adhering to that. If you saw large fluctuations in your general fund, there'd be a little bit more concern, but nothing of that nature. If you're curious, all the places we audit, those are those blue dots there. That's based on population, Wisconsin clients of similar size. I always give a word of caution, though, to compare yourself to other places because there's so many nuances between governments, especially with active TIFs and everything else going on. Really what's by far more important is how you're adhering to your policy, and you are. Okay, page 3. This page and the next page are taking a look at your debt. So on page 3, this is your debt management. How do you compare to the debt capacity, which is by statute 5% of your equalized value? You also have a policy that is a little bit more restrictive. It takes that 5% and it brings it down to two-thirds of that. You're well below that. You're at 12% at the end of the year. Last year, you were at 14%. 2 years ago, you were at 16%. So it's been going down by a couple of percentage points each year. That's very low compared to some other places that we audit. You can see, again, how that's mapped out. That black line is your debt capacity, your statutory limit. It went up 9.7% from 2023. And the red line being the GO debt outstanding. It's all in the city's funds, no utilities. Utilities do not have debt. That's been inching downward very slightly over the last 5 years. It went down by a net amount of 1.8 million this year compared to 2023. The little table down there, it kind of lays out the debt. Like I said, it's all the GO is in the city funds, TIF included, and the compensated absences. That's vested benefits. There was a new accounting standard that had to be implemented this year, 101, regarding compensated absences. Bill was very well prepared for that, as was Diego, and we had some good training on it last fall as well. But it didn't change significantly from last year overall.
John, before you move on, may I just mention, I really appreciate that you included the Wisconsin Policy Forum link.
Yeah.
And I encourage my colleagues to check out the metrics that you can like filter it for Dane County and see how we compare to our peers all across the county on several different measures. So thank you for including that.
Yeah, I would echo that. It's really informative. And there's all kinds of statistics out there that I find really interesting. All right, page 4 is how much do you pay in debt service? So it's your principal and interest. And we compare that to your non-capital expenditures. Just try to get apples to apples each year. And you can see it's been very consistent over the last 4 years. 16 to 17%. Again, those black dots are other places that we audit of similar size based on population. We generally try to recommend 20% or less, and you're well below that. As we saw from the last presenter, good debt management overall at the city. Okay, so pages 5 and 6 are taking a look at the 2 utility funds and kind of speaking off some notes. As I said, Jody Dobson and their team audit these funds, but we pull them into the citywide report. So the water utility is regulated, as you know, by the PSC. And so they set an authorized rate for the city a number of years ago of 4.9%. We came in a little bit under that at 3.5 and 4.1 in 2023. You can see how that there's a calculation that goes into that, but the graph right below there, the upper line, the darker blue line, those are your revenues for that fund, and the lighter line right below that are your expenses. Your revenues decreased by about 1%, so compared to last year. So that does impact your rate of return a little bit. Generally for most places that we see, if you don't increase rates, revenues are very flat or slightly declining because of conservation efforts and other initiatives. So that's one thing to kind of keep your eye on. If expenses continue to slowly creep up, your revenues are most likely going to stay flat. So you want to stay on top of those rates to make sure that they make sense going forward. There were no rate changes in 2024 then, obviously. Expenses decreased slightly compared to 2023. But all 5 years presented here, positive operating margin, which is what you want to see. This water utility fund is in very good shape. Another metric here is 2/3 of the way down the unrestricted reserves. There are no revenue bonds, so all your cash is unrestricted. If you have revenue bonds, there's usually covenants within there that require certain restrictions or reserves to be set up according to those debt compliance areas. But there are none of those. So the $4.9 million calculates out to 19 months. We generally recommend 3 months at a minimum for operations, and then a number of months, 3 to 12 months on top of that for unanticipated capital needs. So you've got a nice comfortable margin in this fund. A big part of that is there's no debt consuming the cash in this fund. If you did, there would be another metric at the bottom up here, a bar graph that we usually present, which shows where your plant has been derived from, either earnings or being financed through debt. So we generally recommend 50% or more of the plant being financed through earnings. You're at 100%. Okay. This fund's in good shape.
Before you move on, if I could, I just want to make a brief comment related to the water rates. Water rates are governed by Public Service Commission. You have to go through a rate case to get an increase in rates approved. It's been 3 to maybe 3.5 years since the city did its last full rate case. Given the drop in the rate of return and knowing there are some large capital projects coming up, I would recommend that we look at what's called a simplified rate case, which you're able to do within 5 years of that full rate case. That's something we've discussed with Public Works and utility staff, and I believe they're getting something ready to bring forward to Public Works Committee and this committee. But I think that'd be helpful to look at that of doing smaller interim increases before we get to our next full rate case.
Is that a study that you're,
Yeah,
or
so
is it a
the
request to the
yeah,
PSC?
it still needs to go through the Public Service Commission, but it's a much simpler abbreviated process to do this simplified rate case that looks at making a marginal adjustment based on your rate of return. And if you're under your authorized rate of return, then you can do that smaller adjustment. The full rate case usually does involve hiring a consultant to do a study and then going through a multi-month process. But the simplified rate case is much shorter.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Bill.
Another example of our city staff being proactive based on very good information.
Yeah, absolutely. The last page on this is on page 6 of sewer utility results. And this fund is not regulated by the PSC. But similar metrics being presented here. Again, you can see that dark line of your revenues, expenses of the lighter line. Here they're a little bit smaller margins, kind of almost a mirror image of each other. Revenues were up 7%. For this fund, there was a rate increase during 2024, thus the increase. But operating expenses also increased by a little bit higher percentage of 11%. Still in good shape. You can see the unrestricted reserves here, 7.6 months, 7.68. That's definitely considered sufficient. And again, there's no debt in this fund. Any questions for me on the numbers?
Yeah, I have kind of a large general question. This is the second presentation of yours I've sat through and always impressed by the work of our city and that everybody does. And I like big takeaways, and what's the one big takeaway that we can tell our fellow counselors? We're doing things right and we want to continue to do things right. And in order to maintain that, obviously we don't want to take on more debt, but we have to go to the public and ask for more money. And, we want to be given direction to stay within, this type of better rating. Because I think obviously expenses are going to go up around us. So we're going to have to be able to, address that.
You want me to comment on that or you want
Yeah,
Bill?
please
Okay,
do.
yep, I'd be happy to.
I'd
Yeah.
like your comments.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time.
Exactly.
About 30 years and worked with a lot of municipalities. And
Uh-huh.
I think the takeaway from Middleton is there's really good fiscal management. Meaning, we talked about the general fund to the water sewer fund, touched on debt, but obviously the city has a lot of other funds. How the golf course has recovered over the last number of years and been able to pay back the advance, the strength of the two, now it's going to be 3 TIFs, is very impressive. And how it's not just looking at those singularly, but it's collectively and how they all kind of intertwine. I think a lot of people, well, most people don't understand fund accounting, but if you kind of live in that world like we do, it's there's got to be good kind of foresight. As auditors, I can come in and say, here's where you were at December 31st, but looking ahead and having a plan and how does the golf course pay this back? Where are the TIFs going to end up being down the road and forecasting that out? I think, with Bill's leadership and everybody else that surrounds him and gets involved with this, it's very good fiscal management, having a very good understanding of where the city sits financially is I guess my takeaway.
Sure. So I
We
would
don't
imagine
always see that.
I would imagine you have scenarios where you do presentations like you just did this evening. And the cities aren't getting the message. You're pointing things out to them and they're like, okay, yep, thanks,
Mhm.
we appreciate that. And they keep spending like there's no spending limit or
Yeah.
whatever, taking on more debt.
Yeah, you can end up, I've, again, been doing this long enough. I've seen some pretty tough situations.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately that then trickles out to the citizens. So we have to pull back services and shut down pools and do other things that can be pretty challenging.
Yeah.
Pretty challenging. It takes a long time to recover from those situations. So nothing of that nature here, but I do know about, the campus plans and other big projects down the road. So by no means am I coming here and saying, hey, I mean, this is where you are at the end of the year. But again, you're just within that 2 to 4 months in the general fund. And, there's not excessive funds sitting around or anything like that. So again, having a kind of a foresight is how, I guess, giving everything is due diligence. But again, my role isn't to look forward. It's to kind of report back on what's happened in the past. But where you're sitting at December 31st, it's, fiscally very sound.
Well, I absolutely think our history does project what our future is in many respects.
I agree.
That's my opinion. Thank you.
The
May
last
I
thing I'll mention,
get
I won't walk through
comments?
it, is, go ahead, Bill. You want to say
Yeah,
something?
I was just going to say, I think that it also speaks to the financial policies that the city has had in place in some cases for a number of years and the discipline that the council has shown in staying within those policies, whether it be in fund balance or in debt service, that builds a lot of the consistency that we're seeing here. Specifically related to debt, as some of the numbers indicate, the city has consciously been drawing down our overall level of debt. We're continuing to rapidly repay debt. We're well over 99% of our debt repaid within 10 years, which is one of the items identified in our policy. We have a lot of available debt capacity. So we certainly need to be mindful about taking on new debt, but the city has been deliberate about trying to put ourselves in a position where we can take on some new debt, knowing that we have some larger facility projects and other capital needs coming in the future. And then the last thing I was just going to mention about the financial statements themselves, it's a very long document. It's well over 100 pages now with all the required schedules. But if you do have an opportunity to review it, there are 2 narrative items in the introduction, the transmittal letter, and then the management discussion and analysis. And we spent a lot of time on that to try to explain what the numbers mean and what are changes and trends in the numbers. So definitely would recommend taking a look at that section if you have time to review those.
Thanks. Thank you for mentioning that, Bill. And John, thank you for your presentation. We could have carpooled together to shorten your commute. The one thing that I didn't find in this year's document, and I've seen in others, is the key areas of focus and significant findings. And that's why I was asking if the final was available, because I wasn't sure if that gets dropped into the final. You did mention that there was only one material entry this year. Is it possible that there were no recommended key areas of focus or significant findings?
That is the other part I was going to mention here at the end. You probably, I don't know if you've seen it or not, it was issued in PDF yesterday. Again, the papers are coming. But that's the reporting and insights that you're referring to. And we do talk about significant risks we have to consider as part of our audit. There's nothing unique to Middleton. The required communications, that one entry is pointed out in here is in the stormwater fund, things of that nature. But yes, the area that the section in this report that most places are interested in are the internal control matters. And so they're the same 2 points we had last year. One is that we prepared your financials. And the other is trying to establish a control to have an independent review of rates for new clients, as well as changes in rates within the billing system to try to prevent errors kind of going forward. That's been out there for the last couple of years too.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Thank you for that. And I'll
Mhm.
look forward to reading that. Bill, your comments about our financial policies, the previous councils have established, now that has led to or helped us reach this point where now we can take on more debt. I think we need to get that message out there that this was intentional to keep us at the current low level that we're at in order to make it possible to take on greater debt in the future, because I don't want people to think like we're abandoning a policy. It would be better for them to understand that this policy was intentional to give us flexibility in the future. And I don't think I've heard that emphasized enough. So good thing to bring up. And then going back to Alder Lorman's comment, basically trusting the staff. So I look at TID 5, and we have a positive fund balance of $605,622 at the end of 2024. That's not nearly enough to cover a city financed TIF for the garden district as we're being asked, correct? This is another illustration of the recommendation we've gotten from you. This underscores we don't have the money available to do debt-free city financing, and that's one of the reasons the staff has
Yeah,
not
that's-
recommended.
That's correct. There's
Percent.
not sufficient cash on hand to meet the level that's been asked for an upfront TIF incentive. That would require borrowing for that incentive. And when we've taken on debt for TIF, we want to ensure that there's sufficient increment generated to pay back that debt obligation. So
Yep.
that would be something we continue to look at consistent with our TIF policy.
Okay, and then finally, I noted page 62, I think it is, says we have 182 million thereabouts in capital assets, and it looks like 42.5 million is in buildings, net of accumulated depreciation. And so that made me think, okay, am I understanding this right? Our buildings are worth $42.5 million. And I think this is going to be helpful for the community campus discussion, because we're considering tripling that number in new borrowing. I know we've
Mhm.
got to refine the numbers, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding that one number correctly, that our capital assets, specifically in buildings, net of accumulated depreciation, that's worth 42.5 million right now. I'm looking at page 62.
Yeah, just trying to bring up that
Yep.
page. Must be page 62 of the PDF. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I always use the
Um,
PDF.
It's not what's on my page, but whatever.
Maybe it's a different. The minutes were added to the packet, so it could be 2 pages earlier than
Yeah,
that. Sorry, Bill.
it's not even close on mine. That's all right.
Yeah, I'm having trouble finding the exact $42 million number that you're referring to. On page, I think it's 30 of the financial statements. There is a table. I'll share a screen here.
It might have something to do with the fact that the table is an image. I think I tried to.
Yeah, for this page, this is page 30 of the financial statements for the governmental activities. So excluding the utilities and the golf course, which are under business type activities. There's a capital assets being depreciated number for buildings of 31,024,592. So that would include buildings like City Hall, Police Station, Municipal Operations Center, most of our city facilities. But that is the ballpark of what we have for our facilities. Those are reported at historical cost. So whatever the cost is when they are constructed, that goes on as their value. And then we do straight line depreciation over the life of the building. So certainly when some of our facilities were constructed, like and I don't know the number for City Hall off the top of my head, but given the age of this building, that's going to be a much smaller number at the historical cost than it would be in today's dollars. But I think the point is correct that the range of dollars that we're talking about for new investment in the community campus would be significantly higher than what's on our financial statements.
Okay, thank you. And it's page 62 and 3 in the original file.
Okay.
And it's an image, so if you're searching for the number, you won't find it because
Mm,
it's in an image.
Okay, yep.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
So I move to recommend the council accept the city's 2024 annual comprehensive financial report.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. Agreements and contracts. Let me make sure I'm, whoops, sorry. Yep, agreements and contracts. Approval of the assignment of development agreement by 6300 UAMF LLC to Wings Financial Credit Union. There's no financial impact. We have referral history, city attorney.
Yeah, relates to a development agreement that was approved roughly a month ago, I think. Regarding the 6300 University Avenue project. It does permit assignments to lenders, collateral assignments to lenders, just with city approval, and this is a pretty standard form. Like, say, we'll have to put in the reference and attach the developer's agreement to the form, but the rest of the language and form of the agreement is just fine, so I would recommend.
Looking just for then a recommendation from this
Yeah.
body for approval.
Right to the council for
Okay.
approval.
For review or approval.
For recommend, yeah, the motion would be to recommend to the council for approve the
Okay.
collateral assignment.
Alrighty. So then in front of us is a recommendation to approve the assignment of the development agreement by 6300 UAMF LLC to Wings Financial Credit Union. All those discussion?
Well, you want a
We don't-
motion?
we don't
first?
have a
That's the
motion.
Yeah.
You made the motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
What
I'm
was the
making a motion.
motion?
The motion is recommendation to the common council for approval of the assignment of the development agreement.
I will second that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Motion in a second. You had made the motion, Larman, and second.
Yep.
Amaro? Got it.
Okay. Do we have any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Miscellaneous appointment of paramedic Chris Odell as acting EMS chief.
Mr. Chairman, can I offer a substitute, I guess, action item on this topic? Before
Yes,
you get into
please.
discussion. So based upon additional discussion with the outgoing EMS chief, finance director, and Mr. Odell and paramedic Selnick, I would, instead of the recommendation that's in your packet, offer the following instead. It would be a motion to appoint paramedics Chris Odell and Jennifer Selleck as officers in charge for the duration of the EMS chief recruitment and onboarding, and authorize the city administrator to negotiate the compensation for the OIC roles per the terms of the local 311 union contract.
Okay, and you have that in writing up on the screen?
I have it on my laptop, but I can
Um,
read it again if need be.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll make the second. I'll second that.
all righty. Then I'll just simply state that in front of us is a motion to recommend as stated by City Administrator Gatto. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thanks. Well, I do believe this brings us to the end of our meeting. Anything else from the committee? Okay. On that, we stand adjourned.